I never thought a single day could change the course of a relationship I believed was unshakable. My name is Michael and my wife Laura and I had been married for 5 years. Our life together was a comfortable rhythm, weekend brunches, late-night movie marathons, and the occasional spontaneous trip. Everything seemed ordinary, predictable, and secure. But all it took was one phone call, one message, one unexpected encounter to reveal the cracks I had ignored for too long. It started with a casual text. Laura's ex, Jake, had reached out. She laughed when she showed me the message, telling me it was just harmless catching up. I smiled, nodded, and didn't overthink it. After all, Jake had been a part of her life before me. What could possibly go wrong? Weeks passed, and the messages continued. Innocent at first. How's work? Or remember that time we... But then subtly pushing boundaries, inserting memories, flirtation, and familiarity. I noticed her phone would light up at odd hours, her tone changing when she spoke to him. I didn't jump to conclusions, but something felt off. The trust one had always given her was starting to feel like blind faith. One Friday evening, the truth became unavoidable. I returned home earlier than usual from work, a slight feeling in my gut warning me that tonight would be different. I walked through the front door and heard her laughter before I even saw her. She was on a video call with Jake. The casual tone, the smiles, the way she leaned in to show something on her phone. It wasn't just a friendly conversation anymore. I didn't confront her immediately. I stayed in the shadows of our living room, listening quietly, observing without making my presence known. My heart raced, but I reminded myself that restraint was crucial. This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about dramatic confrontation. It was about understanding, about seeing clearly what I was dealing with. Finally, she noticed me. Her eyes widened for a split second, a brief flicker of guilt or surprise. I couldn't tell which. Then she smiled, the casual smile of someone who thought everything was normal. I stepped into the room calm, composed. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "Is Jake here often?" The question was simple, neutral, but it carried weight. Her face fell, the smile gone, replaced by something unreadable. The call ended abruptly, and for a moment, silence filled the room, thick and tense. I didn't rush to fill it. I let her sit with her own choices. That night, dinner was quiet. Laura avoided my eyes, her mind clearly elsewhere. I kept my composure, letting the evening unfold without confrontation. Every instinct screamed to challenge her, to demand an explanation, but I knew that losing control would only give her power over the situation. Sometimes the shock comes not from yelling, but from calm observation and measured responses. The following days were a tense blur of uncertainty. Laura acted normal in public, smiling and laughing as if nothing had happened, but at home, the air was thick with unspoken words. I noticed subtle changes, how she would glance at her phone when I entered a room, how she suddenly became protective of her schedule, and how even the smallest question about her day made her tense. I decided to take a step back and observe. I didn't want to react emotionally. I wanted to understand the extent of her involvement with Jake. Sometimes people reveal their true intentions not in what they say, but in what they do when they think no one is watching. It wasn't long before I uncovered more than I expected. Jake had been sending her gifts, arranging secret meetups, and even making subtle comments about their past intimacy. Each revelation hit me like a punch to the chest, but I refused to lose my composure. The moment I reacted with anger or desperation, I would have lost the upper hand. Instead, I planned my response carefully. One Saturday evening, Laura invited a few friends over, including Jake, without mentioning to me that he would be there. I knew instantly that this was the line she had crossed. It wasn't just messages or flirtation anymore. It was the audacity of inviting her ex into our home, under our roof, as if nothing had changed. When they arrived, I greeted everyone warmly, including Jake, keeping my voice calm, my demeanor composed. Inside, my mind raced. Every instinct screamed to confront him, to humiliate him, to make Laura feel the weight of her choices. But I stayed silent, letting the night play out while I observed. Then the moment came. Laura, sensing my awareness, tried to whisper excuses, to justify, to manipulate the narrative. I ignored her. I let Jake speak, let him feel comfortable, and then with a simple, quiet tone that carried more weight than any raised voice could, I said, "You've crossed the line, Laura. This ends tonight." The room went silent. Friends froze, Jake's confident smirk faltered, and Laura's eyes widened in disbelief. She didn't scream, didn't argue. She simply realized that her actions had consequences she hadn't anticipated. I didn't need to justify, yell, or explain further. The calm certainty in my voice was enough. In that instant, the power shifted. Everyone present understood that boundaries had been set, and that the line she had crossed was non-negotiable. No theatrics, no manipulation, no pleading would change the reality of the situation. Laura bolted from the room, the energy in the house abruptly transforming from tension to stunned silence. I stayed where I was, letting the moment settle. Sometimes, shock isn't about chaos. It's about clarity. It's about showing people the consequences of their actions without losing control yourself. That night, I realized that true authority in any relationship comes from maintaining composure, from acting deliberately, and from responding with precision instead of emotion. The next morning, Laura didn't show up at the breakfast table. I poured my coffee, sat down, and let the silence fill the room. She wasn't hiding out because she was scared of me. She was processing the consequences of her actions. I had given her one simple, clear message, and it was enough to shake her world. By mid-morning she returned, tentative, her usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. She tried to explain herself, her words tumbling out quickly, apologetic and defensive at once. I listened quietly, giving her the space to speak, but I didn't respond immediately. I understood something crucial. Any reaction too soon would have diluted the impact of the boundary I had set. Finally I spoke, my tone calm, measured. Laura, I hear what you're saying, but crossing that line changes everything. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, and some things can't be undone with words alone. Her eyes welled up, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, vulnerable and human, not the person who had defied our marriage. But the difference was clear. Love without respect is empty, and boundaries without enforcement are meaningless. I had enforced mine, and now the responsibility for what came next was hers alone. Over the following days, I maintained the same composed routine. I didn't chase her apologies. I didn't demand explanations. I simply continued with my life, my work, and my standards, showing through my actions that stability and self-respect matter more than drama. Each interaction became a reminder that crossing boundaries carries consequences, and that calm, deliberate action holds more power than shouting or confrontation. Friends and family noticed the change. They saw the tension ease, the drama dissipate, and they remarked on the quiet authority I now carried. It wasn't about dominance or control. It was about clarity, about showing that respect and boundaries are non-negotiable. Laura's actions had shocked everyone, yes, but my measured response left an even deeper impression. Eventually, Laura began to make choices that reflected the reality she had created. Some steps were tentative, others hesitant, but I let her navigate the path she had chosen. I never had to force accountability. By simply standing firm, I allowed the natural consequences to take shape, and in that, the situation resolved more effectively than any argument or confrontation could have achieved. Weeks later, looking back, I understood that the line crossed with her ex wasn't just about infidelity or betrayal. It was about awareness, responsibility, and the realization that some actions carry immediate, undeniable consequences. I didn't have to yell, I didn't have to chase, and I didn't have to react emotionally. Saying one thing, calmly and firmly, was enough to shift the dynamic entirely. In life, people often test the limits, but strength lies in knowing when to act and when to remain composed. The shock doesn't always come from dramatic confrontation. It comes from clarity, from deliberate restraint, and from showing without words or theatrics that some lines once crossed will never be ignored. And that night, as Laura left the room, everyone understood the truth. Sometimes one simple response changes everything.